Torah, God is referred to by many connotations, or kinuayim, in Hebrew. While describing the Almighty, words that connote Him are not considered sacred names that may not be erased. In addition to the Almighty's connotative descriptions in the Bible, there are others that have been passed down to us by the sages. Biblical connotations describe the more anthropomorphic nature of the Almighty, such as that He is merciful, forgiving, etc. Kabbalah explains that each of the many connotations of the Almighty corresponds to a particular sephirah. The 13 principles of divine mercy. Of all the connotations of God found in the Bible, the most important are the 13 principles of mercy. 1. Havaya. Havaya, God, merciful, and gracious. Of a patient countenance, and of great loving kindness, and truth. Who keeps acts of loving kindness for thousands of generations. Who bears iniquity, and transgression, and sin, and absolves. In Hebrew, these principles are called midat, or attributes. The word midat permutes to spelled mut, which means likeness, as in the verse, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness." The Torah commands us to be like God, that is to integrate His attributes into our lives and act as accordingly. The specific examples brought by the sages are the attributes of mercy and forgiveness. Abishael says, "Be like Him, just as He is merciful." Chapter 10, Connotations 159. And forgiving, you should be merciful and forgiving. 3. Thus, God's connotations reveal those aspects of His character, which are best suited for refining our own character. Of the 13 principles of mercy, God is most often referred to by the fourth, the merciful one. In the Talmudic literature, the Aramaic form of this connotation, Rachmana, is used almost exclusively in reference to the Almighty. Another of God's attributes that is often used to refer to Him is Elyon, literally meaning, the Supreme One, which in Yiddish is translated as the Eibishter. The 13 principles and the Sephirot as mentioned earlier, though we normally speak of 10 Sephirot, in practice, when including the Sephirah of knowledge, there are altogether 13, as the supernal crown divides into 3 heads. Clearly then the 13 principles may be seen to correspond to the 13 Sephirot. For like in many other cases, taking the elements of both the principles and the Sephirot in order draws the simplest and most straightforward correspondence. Thus, the first measure corresponds to the first head of the crown, the second to the second head, and so on. Let us first chart the correspondence between the 13 principles and the Sephirot. 160. What you need to know about Kabbalah. Unknowable head. Havaya. Head of nothingness. Havaya. Extended head. God. Understanding. Gracious. Wisdom. Merciful. Knowledge. A patient countenance. Might. Truth. Loving kindness. Great loving kindness. Beauty keeps acts of loving kindness for thousands of generations. Acknowledgement. Bears transgression. Victory. Bears iniquity. Foundation. Bears sin. Kingdom. Absolves, beginning with the 3 heads of the crown, whose experiential manifestations are faith, pleasure, and will respectively. We wish to explain this correspondence. The name Havaya, the essential name of God, connotes here the 2 higher manifestations of the Sephirah of crown. To understand this we must first note that traditionally, in the Zohar and the writings of the Arizal, crown is divided into 2 partzufim called Adik Yomin and Arik Anpin. However, the Arizal teaches, based on the Zohar, that the inner partzuf, Adik Yomin, actually divides into 2 heads, while the chapter 10, Connotations 161 external partzuf, Arik Anpin, is a head unto itself. Thus, the 2 higher heads are connoted by the same name, Havaya. The first Havaya connotes the transcendent and unknowable head of the crown that is experienced as faith in the soul. The second Havaya connotes the second head called nothingness, because it is the source of all that was created, ex nihilo. We saw above that the seemingly redundant appearance of the essential name Havaya at the beginning of the 13 principles of mercy refers to 2 ways in which the name describes the Almighty. One way refers to His essence as it transcends creation. The other way refers to God's essence as it manifests in creation. The unknowable head of the crown transcends creation altogether. The head of nothingness manifests as the ultimate life source within creation, The lowest of the three heads, the extended head, corresponds to the name, here translated as God. In the previous chapter we saw that this is also the name of God that corresponds to the vessel of loving kindness. The adjective extended, Eric, is closely associated, even in English, with loving kindness, as in the idiom to extend kindness. As a root in Hebrew, this name implies power. Indeed, the true signature of a powerful person is his ability to extend kindness infinitely. Not being able to do so demonstrates restrictions and an inability to act without limits. Merciful refers to wisdom, and gracious, in the sense of forgiving to understanding. Like these two sephirot, that never part, 5. The idiom merciful and forgiving appears together many times in the Bible. As explained by the Torah commentaries, 6. Mercy is aroused when seeing someone in distress, while forgiveness is aroused when hearing someone calling out in distress. 7. In Kabbalah, sight is associated with wisdom and hearing with understanding. 8. The connotation of patient countenance, which in the Zohar and the writings of the Arizal is understood to include two divine principles of mercy. 9. Alludes to the two aspects of the Sephirah of knowledge. Within knowledge, the source of the emotions of the 162. What you need to know about Kabbalah heart, they are the source of loving kindness and the source of might, the two primary emotions, identifying them with the right and left side, respectively, of knowledge. As we have seen above, the Sephirah of knowledge lies directly under the Sephirah of crown along the middle axis of the Sephirot, and in our context reflects the crown's external parts of Eric Anpin. This is evident because the Hebrew patient countenance, Erekapayim, is rendered in Aramaic as Eric Anpin. The Arizal teaches that the male and female components of the parts of Eric Anpin are situated to its right and left respectively. These are the origins of the right and left sides of the Sephirah of knowledge. Chassidic teachings explain that phenomena associated with the right relate to reality uniformly and transcend individual shortcomings, while phenomena associated with the left are sensitive to faults and shortcoming. In the case of the two aspects of knowledge, or consciousness, the right side exhibits patience by transcending the problems and arguments that abound in reality. An individual can be patient with misdeeds and improprieties by transcending them and focusing his consciousness on the goodness of the Almighty who guides the world to its ultimate good. The word for patient, erek, is the Hebrew root of the Aramaic erik, which we saw above to mean long, or extended. This is the quality of loving kindness, as noted. The left side, on the contrary, must face the negative aspects of life head-on and is therefore forced to react by assuming many different stances, or countenances, depending on the situation at hand. The connotation countenance in the 13 principles of mercy is actually written in the Hebrew plural form, alluding to how at its lowest level of descent and contraction, the left side can no longer see the inherent unity that subsists throughout reality and experiences reality as a plurality. The word apayim, translated here as countenance, is the plural form of the word af, which means anger, or nose, the central feature of the face or countenance. 10, alluding to the harshness with which the left side meets reality. Ultimately though, it is the right side that envelopes chapter 10, Connotations. 163 the left and provides it with an overriding context of goodness and unity. 11 the connotation of great kindness is of course directly related to the Sephirah of loving kindness and does not require further explanation. As explained above, the word truth possesses distinct meanings in Kabbalah and Chassidut. Truth as fulfillment is associated with the Sephirah of foundation. Here, truth is associated with the Sephirah of might, which in Kabbalah is identified with the attribute of divine judgment. 12 truth as a connotation implies God's judgment. 13 which is aimed at ensuring that each person receives that which he or she deserves. 14 the next connotation, who keeps acts of loving kindness for thousands of generations refers to the Sephirah of beauty. Beauty, situated along the middle axis of the Sephirot under knowledge, mediates between loving kindness and might by including the essence of both, and so, in the Zohar and the writings of the Arizal, who keeps acts of loving kindness for thousands of generations is understood to include two divine principles of mercy, as above, in the Sephirah of knowledge, with regard to the division of a patient countenance into two components. Like physical beauty, spiritual beauty is the product of the tasteful inclusion of many different elements together. The beauty of a family, or group of people, becomes most apparent when it is surveyed over many thousands of generations. Who keeps acts of loving kindness refers to the right side of the sephira of beauty, the side of loving kindness. For thousands of generations refers to the left side of the sephira of beauty, the side of might, for only by divine might do our acts of loving kindness remain intact for thousands of generations. The next three connotations appear together in a single phrase describing God as he who bears iniquity, transgression, and sin. God is always ready to forgive our sins, our misdeeds and action. The three sephirot that correspond to our powers of action are the triplet of victory, acknowledgement, and foundation. To 164. What you need to know about Kabbalah. Understand in greater depth how these three principles of divine mercy correspond to the sephirot of victory, acknowledgement, and foundation. In particular, we need to note that according to Kabbalah these sephirot are the practical manifestation of the three sephirot of the intellect: wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Thus, the three types of negative actions, iniquity, transgression, and sin, reflect the intellectual sephirot, in order. The word for iniquity appears in the verse, "Happy is the man for whom God does not count his iniquity." 15. The Baal Shem Tov explained that this verse can also be read as, "Happy is the man, for whom not thinking about God, is iniquity." As explained in Chesed, the essence of life is one's connection with the Almighty. Thus, the individual who considers an iniquity even a temporary lack of awareness of the divine presence is to be commended. As explained elsewhere, awareness of God depends on selflessness, the inner experience of wisdom. 16. In fact, in Hebrew, the letters of the word for iniquity permute to form the adjective meaning humble, which is the revealed aspect of selflessness. Wisdom is manifest pragmatically as victory. The legal meaning of transgression in the Torah is related to the role of a guard. If the guard fails to watch his charge in an appropriate manner, then he is considered to have transgressed. 17. Such failure is inevitably the result of decreased levels of joy and energy, the inner experience of the sephira of understanding, whose practical manifestation is acknowledgement. The word for sin in Hebrew can more accurately be translated as error. Clearly, making a mistake is the product of not paying attention, not being conscious of the matter at hand. Sin error thus corresponds in the mind to a dysfunction of the sephira of knowledge. In Chesed, knowledge is defined as the ability to connect to other things. When knowledge does not function correctly, it is hard to create any kind of relationship. When the dysfunctional state of knowledge is manifest in practice, it affects the sephira of foundation, specifically in the form of what in rabbinic terminology is euphemistically called sins of youth. Chapter 10, Connotations. 165. Unwarranted sexual behavior. In Kabbalah, foundation is identified with the procreative organ. Finally, the last connotation, which we have translated as absolves, literally means a state of immaculate spiritual cleanliness. Absolves is actually part of the three-word Hebrew phrase that means, and absolves and does not absolve. The sages interpret this as a conditional: God absolves the sins of those who repent but does not absolve the sins of those who do not. The conditional reflects a special quality of the sovereign whose judgment exercises the power of reward and punishment based on the conditional actions of the subjects. Notes: 1. Exodus 34 6-7. 2. See pages 27, n. 2. 3. Jerusalem Talmud Paya 1-1, 3a. When quoting this passage in the Talmud, Maimonides, Hilshot Diot 1-6, lists 8 more attributes, connotations of the Almighty that we are commanded to integrate into our lives. They are: holy, patient, great loving kindness, righteousness, upright, sincere, brave, and strong. Following the lead of the correspondence of the 13 attributes of mercy to the sephira to be described in the text, besides the most obvious correspondences, like brave, gibber, to might, gevura, these altogether 10 attributes enumerated by Maimonides can be corresponded to the sephirot in the following manner. Note that a patient countenance, literally, slow to anger, a property most characteristic of a rectified king, appears here as kingdom, whereas with regard to the 13 principles it corresponds to knowledge. In Kabbalah it is explained that often kingdom reflects knowledge. In the secret of the mouth, kingdom, being situated between the head, the intellectual faculties, and the body, the emotive attributes. 166. What you need to know about Kabbalah. Crown? Holy? Understanding? Forgiving? Wisdom? Merciful? Might? Brave? Loving kindness? Of great loving kindness? Beauty? Upright? Acknowledgement? Sincere? Victory? Strong? Foundation? Righteous? Kingdom? A patient countenance. 4. See note 9. 5. Zohar 3, 4a. 6. See Rabbi Abraham ibn Ezra on Adlok. 7. This relationship is expressed in 2 verses in the prophets. My eye will not have mercy, Ezekiel 5:11, and he will indeed be gracious to you when he shall hear your cry, Isaiah 30:19. 8. See more in The Art of Education, pages 106-9. 9. The Arizal, following the Zohar, starts the 13 principles from the name, which according to our account is the third. The 2 names of Havaya are understood to be above the 13 principles. The 2 missing principles are then introduced by splitting the into 4 and 2 and 3 word attributes principles, which would then be 1. Patient, 2. Countenance, 3. Recalls acts of loving kindness, 4. For 1,000 generations. When drawing the correspondence between the 13 principles and the Sephirot, the Arizal and the Zohar begin from the chapter 10, Connotations. 167. Lowest head of the crown, the extended head, with the 2 names of Havaya implicitly corresponding to the 2 higher heads of the crown. The Sephirot of knowledge and beauty are divided into 2 aspects each. 10. Literally means, long nose. The Ibn Ezra, on the verse in Exodus, explains that since anger is vented through one's nose, the longer a person's nose, the less prone he or she is to express their anger outwardly. Thus, the well-known Jewish facial feature is an expression of God's infinite patience. In addition, the Ibn Ezra writes that one with a long nose is able to sweeten, that is, rectify, one who has a short nose, and who therefore acts impulsively, as in the verse, the short-nosed acts impulsively, Proverbs 14:17, where short-nosed is translated as quick-tempered. 11. More deeply, Chassidic teachings explain that the right side of knowledge is the precursor to the divine soul, while the left side is the precursor to the animal soul. The initial role of the left side of knowledge is to deter the infant and child from those things that would cause harm. Because the left side descends deep into reality, it is prone to fall under the influence of the impure husks, kaliput, and thus hunger and the infant's subsequent cry for food, which saves it from starvation, eventually becomes a craving for food which is independent of hunger. Thus, it is the left side of knowledge that is sensitive to danger. The right side, which develops later in life through the study of the Torah, which, in its entirety, is the name of the one God, is faced with the task of reuniting the left side with the person's original source in the divine, and particularly in the divine will and purpose for his or her life. 12. As noted in the Torah Academy, the academic discipline related to might is law, the study of judgment and the administration of justice. 13. See Rosh Hashanah 17b. 14. Rashi, Exodus 34:7. 15. Psalms 32:2. 16. See pages 104. 17. Exodus 22:8. Baba Metzia 36b, and elsewhere. 168 words 11. In the introduction to Part 3, W.E. noted that every word in the Torah in truth refers to God, the Creator of all. This is because nothing in our mundane reality